Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to make this presentation. I do a lot of presentations, and it's hard to anticipate the level of the audience and their level of understanding. So, and I think many of the speakers are in the same situation I am, and as we've gone through this the last day and today, there's a tremendous amount of repetition and coming up with very, very similar principles in each of the presentations. So that's a good news, bad news story. The bad news is, we're all looking at these common problems that have been known for 10 years, and we're saying, gee, we got a lot of problems. The good news is that from 10 years ago, where many of these problems were identified, not a lot of people either knew it or were willing to admit it or were willing to listen to it. Now, there's sort of a perfect storm gathering of industry, government, innovation, finance, and others realizing that all these common problems exist. So don't think of it as a bad idea. Think of it as a very good idea that everyone is getting this common meme about what the problems are. And so, but I am going to suffer from the same thing as everyone else because I have some similar topics. So what I did as I was listening to the presentations yesterday, I did a quick thing to say, well, there are a whole bunch of common views that we have. And I want to talk about, just real briefly, to say that, yeah, I agree with these common views, but I also, the main focus of my presentation is, so what is our organization and the ecosystem in which we operate, what are we actually doing about it? What have we done about it over the last 5 years, and what's the direction? So I hope some very, very positive things. So people talked about procurement gaps, and one of the biggest issues is taking commodity, just to understand, supply chain optimization and supply chain management, people point at it as if it's like group buying process, and people point at it and say, oh my God, that's the devil. Well, that is absolutely not true. IBM did a $43 billion supply chain management optimization that had an absolutely phenomenal impact on its business and is the world's example of fantastic supply chain management. That has nothing to do with the full spectrum of medical devices, only a subset. So that's why I say commodity products and innovative disruptive products demand different approaches. Commodity cost minimization assumptions stifle innovation. In fact, they eliminate it almost entirely. So we need a path that encourages innovation, and that's one of the messages that came out yesterday. Systemic gaps, silos sub-optimize by preventing cross-system joint optimization. So in other words, if a hospital has to pay $5,000 more per procedure to save $80,000 lifetime cost in the community, that historically has not happened because those are two different payers and two different realizations of benefit. Well, those things are starting to change and starting to be realized. We've got to bend the cost curve. So if we're going to bend the cost curve, we have to look at a whole system perspective, not just the individual institution or task. Legacy business models and reimbursements are antiquated and strongly resist innovation, and system-wide business cases need to be facilitated. Market gaps, receptive local markets are irrelevant for multinational enterprises. In other words, if Medtronic lost all of Canada compared to its worldwide sales, that's not too much of an issue. It's like, it's what, 1, 2, 3%? I know you don't want to lose it. But as Peter Robertson, yeah, that's true. Well, as Peter Robertson, one of our collaborators, and he's the general manager of GE in Canada, I asked him the question at our open house last year, what's the value of the local market to GE Global? And he says it's no value, or almost no value, because it's like 1%, 2% of their total global market. However, it is very valuable for them from the point of view of the high quality of field evaluation, clinical trials, and other things that can be done in Canada. But for SMEs, for small to medium-sized enterprises, a receptive local market is absolutely critical to be able to go global. And this is something that we are very, very, very weak on historically, but things are starting to change. The larger medtech ecosystems in Europe and the US, they recognize the value of SMEs in the food chain, but because most of our M&Es in Canada have historically been largely sales and distribution rather than hardcore research and development, the SMEs have not been really part of the food chain, they've just been competitors. They've just been sort of noise in the spectrum, so it's a little different. Policy gaps. We've got the unsustainable cost curve in healthcare, and there are no quick fixes, and we have to have changes now, and people are just starting to accept that. We must transition selectively from pay per device or pay per procedure to pay per outcome. And we need to put systems in place that convert the health system into an engine for economic growth. So these are themes that have been developing and maturing over the last 10 years. And And as I say, there's been a great deal of recent improvement taking us from what I call the backwater towards leadership. And Manuel Trachtenberg's presentation last night, as I said to him after his presentation, it was as if either he was reading my mind or I was reading his mind, or one of the two. So that's very, very, very encouraging. What I want to do now is really, I'm going to blast through a whole bunch of slides, but I want to give you a sense of optimism. I want to show you why there should be optimism for this marketplace. And in fact, Israel is one of our sort of targets to say, if in the middle of the desert in a war zone with 7 million people, you can become the world's leading medtech company, I'm sorry, why could you not do that in Canada? And the reason I'm not in the States and not in Europe is because I truly believe we can do it in Canada, and I'm here to be one of the people who's going to be doing it. So I want to give you a sense of optimism and hope about that. So, Healthcare Technology Exchange, we are essentially a nonprofit venture capital company and investing in seed capital in small companies, but also encouraging M&Es to do research in Canada. And the reason I say nonprofit, I joked last night with someone saying nonprofit because our business really sucks. No, because the others talking yesterday were nonprofit VCs, but not by choice. No, we are actually a nonprofit corporation that deals more on the idea of social capital. In other words, if you invest a ton in research and you don't invest anything in translation, then you have just wasted your money. You've wasted public funds. It's a disaster, an absolute disaster. That's one of the things that exists in Canada. So we invest way too much in research and not balanced in translation. Excuse me. But the business returns aren't there for VCs to come up and do the early investment. So that's why we exist. We exist to fill a gap, and I'll talk about that later. So people talked about surgery and other things, and these are all valid niches. But we look broadly. When we talk about medtech, it's devices, diagnostics, medical imaging, health IT, assistive home care, the whole 9 yards. And one of the things I want to say, people were saying, and you were saying, 0.14% or something like that versus 14% versus 8%, whatever in the other countries. I want to tell you, people don't know that there have been really wonderful medtech successes out of Canada. Cameron talked about one yesterday. Cameron Piron talked about one yesterday. That's the second one there, Sentinel Hologic. An $85 million upfront with $300+ million buyout. Luminex. I'll bet no one in this room knows about Luminex that occupies 5 floors on an office building right downtown Toronto, right on University Avenue. 5 clean room floors on genetic worldwide selling of gene-based diagnostics for cystic fibrosis, respiratory therapy, et cetera. Fascinating technology. They're the Prix Gallienne winner for 2010. That's like the Nobel Prize for medtech. Okay? Did anyone raise their hand? Did anyone know about this company? Well, that's good. That's good. Well, I've got an article in manuscript right now that's dealing with these things that we're talking about. Epical, lab on a chip, smart card, lab on a chip to do point-of-care diagnostics, to give higher accuracy, greater access to health care, and so on. Not necessarily lower cost, because you can't necessarily get lower cost on the volumes that they deal with, but that's not the point. Very innovative technology. Novadac, in the old days, or not in the old days, mostly now, determining the patency of cardiovascular grafts is sort of like I attach them, and then I close, and then I pray. That's sort of what happens. Whereas what happens here, and you can go to their site and see their stuff. This came out of the National Research Council, by the way. What the surgeon does is he reattaches the vessels, then inserts a visualization contrast material, and can look at it in real time to see what the perfusion is, and fix it in real time. In real time, right in surgery. VisualSonics gives essentially histology resolution ultrasound. So you don't have to sacrifice your mice. You can actually use ultrasound to look at a histological level at the progress of disease, the effect of your therapy, et cetera. Now, Neil. Cryocath, Steve Arliss creating this fascinating company to use cryogenic ablation of arrhythmia. And it's a high-pressure cryogenic material going through a very fine catheter to ablate, to freeze and kill, therefore, certain surface tissue to fix arrhythmia. That company was developed, or technology was developed in Montreal and ultimately got sold to Medtronic. IMRIS, Advanced High-Throughput Neurosurgery. That little model on the left-hand side there, neurosurgery techniques, MRIs that can move in and out of the neurosurgery suite, doing multiple surgeries at a time. They've got 140 installs around the world, out of Winnipeg. Out of Winnipeg. Did I say Winnipeg? Now, Medtech. high returns, high salaries, high multipliers. This is why Israel and every other country in the world cares about medtech, okay? That graph, and I know it's hard to read, but the graph on the left-hand side looks at a whole bunch of industries over 10 years from 1996 to 2006. At the very top, total shareholder return 96 to 2006 is medtech. Financial services, steel, pharmaceuticals, auto components. What does the Ontario government invest in? No, don't. That was a... So if you look on the far right, this is Boston Consult. By the way, this data is from Boston Consulting Group. The far right, it shows after the recession that again, medtech is far outpacing Standard & Poor's, far outpacing other things, and far outpacing pharma and biotech. And why? Shorter innovation cycles, lower total investments, high margin products, more bite-sized M&A activity because of the size of them. We are not a small player, believe it or not. We're not a small player. We've got 1,100 companies in Ontario. We have the third largest medtech medical research cluster in North America. And you can see those little dots there. You can see where the clustering of companies is. So Toronto, there's London here. You can see them then cluster around. So we have about $4 billion or so in fact, my next one. Got about $4 billion sales, 22,000 people, 1,100 companies, world-class research in oncology, neuroscience, et cetera. So many good cluster attributes. Weaknesses, the innovation value chain, few anchor M&Es doing true research and development in the country, barriers to local procurement. So these are all familiar topics. So in an ideal world, you've got, whoops, shoot, that's what I want. That's not what I wanted. There we go. So in an ideal world, you've got a fantastic healthcare system that is representative of global need. Their new needs are communicated to research, which then leads to innovation, development, commercialization, and then realization and field evaluation and adoption by the provider. Yeah, doesn't work that way. Like, just doesn't happen. Well, that's not totally true, but it's got serious barriers. And there are barriers of these people knowing how to articulate their needs in a way that these people can understand, these people being motivated to do something outside of grants, but in fact to do things that have the long view, practical view in mind, these people having the skills, capability, and capital to be able to do what they need to do in a right context, the availability of capital and companies and people like Cameron Piron to be able to take these companies and create them, then the commercialization, and even if you get a product over here, these people may not be able to buy it for a variety of reasons that they aren't able to buy innovative technology that doesn't have a certain level of proof. So we're trying to fix this thing. So let's explore some key components. As I say, we've got these problems that everyone's been identifying. A committed group from government, industry, academia, over the last 10 years have been building some solutions. So let's just go over a few of those solutions. Though a few that I want to talk about, I won't spend a lot of time because you heard from Aaron Fencer yesterday on the Center for Imaging Technology and Commercialization. I'm privileged to be on the board of that organization, and some of our projects are included in them. The Ontario Brain Institute, again, just serendipitously, very pleased to be working with Joe Rotman on the creation of the Ontario Brain Institute with a large panel of science and business folks. One of the most important ones I want to talk about is Excite, a globally unique program in healthcare technology assessment, and I'll give you some very interesting details on that. Tapping into the M&E global R&D experience, and where do we go from here? So the first thing I want to talk about is this thing called Excite. So we've talked about, and the quick story is, Dr. Chang was talking about healthcare technology assessment. Other people talked about it as well. Health Canada, FDA, and others, they prove that they are there to ensure that devices are safe and effective. Once that is done, so you make cappuccino and you don't kill anyone. So great. So you make cappuccino, you don't kill anyone. Then it gets out in the market, and you're saying, is a hospital going to buy that? Well, in order for a hospital to buy it, there's the low cost issue. But if you have an informed system, they're going to say, well, I don't just want to buy cappuccino. I want to make. Do I want cappuccino? Do I want something that's cappuccino and chicory and hot chocolate and like 6 other things for the same price? Is there a better technology out there that does more cost effectively than yours? Not just safe and effective to do what it claims to do, but more value for money in the healthcare system. So what's being put up is what drugs have had to face for years, is this comparative effectiveness review healthcare technology assessment. The problem is that Medtronic will spend a ton of dough getting something all the way to post-market and all the way into the hands of someone like OTAC, the Ontario Healthcare Technology Assessment Council, which does an outstanding world-class healthcare technology assessment review. But GE or all of its competitors, Medtronic, GE, and all the competitors, when they get to that point, they're at the mercy of OTAC to say this is a great technology or not a good technology or it misses the point. That's post-market. They've already invested. That's too late. That's too late. So what we're trying to do with this, what do you get when you put, this sounds like a joke, what do you get when you put the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Research and Innovation, MEDT, MEDEC, HTX, MARS, CAHO, OTAC, MASS, M&E, and SE and private sector people into a room for 9 months? What you get actually is a realization of this problem and a desire to try and change this problem, and the ministry knows that there's an unsustainable cost curve in the healthcare system and they got to do something about it. So what came out is a desire to try and change the paradigm, to move healthcare technology assessment from a punitive gate to getting reimbursement, and to move it to be a pre-market technology and problem solution optimization tool. And this is a globally unique approach. So the group, the very, very, very nascent group is called, is called Excite, for excellence in clinical innovation and technical excellence, pre-market healthcare technology assessment and comprehensive evidence development for disruptive technologies, giving privileged access to, based on these technologies having the potential to align with very high health system priorities. So let's explore that. It's not only important to find out good technologies, it's important to diffuse them the right way. So for example, if historically, here's one technology, the next technology, the next technology, because you don't get rid of the ones that aren't as good, they just hang around forever, you end up having a cost curve that just grows and grows and grows, and there's some data there that you can read to show that that does happen. What you need is to say that technology is great. This next technology, oh, that works better in this cohort than the old one does. So let's not allow that old one to be used in that cohort, in that specific cohort. Let's only use the better one. And then similarly, the third one. So you get away from this idea. So it's not about just identifying great technologies, it's also how are they adopted to realize the benefit of those technologies. So people also have said, the difference between pharma and medtech, pharma, you get a patent, you throw the drug out there, and you've got patent protection for a ton of time. The average lifespan, and Neil, you and others in the room can correct me on this, but the average lifespan for a particular version of a medical device is about 18 months, if that. In fact, Steve Osterly at AdvaMed last year, talking about innovation and physicians and physician involvement, Stephen, said that about 93% of the products that Medtronic has on the market, the original idea came from a practicing physician. And not from inside their labs, but from a practicing physician. And that's a real testament to Medtronic's interaction with the medical community. But there are regulatory conflict of interest and other things coming along to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should be like drugs, like sort of separate them and not have these kinds of conflict of interest. That's a bad idea, because the process is completely iterative all over the place. From these products go through development once they're in the marketplace. And there are changes, as you go from the physician idea, venture capital, startup company, approved technology, big medtech buyout, then payers and so on. This used to be the cycle, but now we've got capital crunch, increasing regulatory hurdles, medtech companies buying their smaller companies later, pricing pressures, comparative effectiveness review challenges. This is getting tough. This is getting tough. So ideally what you want to be able to do is say, look, these guys are not in business. They know their problems, but they don't know how to articulate them in a way that the business and research community can really understand. So what we're doing is we're working with them to do a facilitated problem identification, followed by publishing those problems to the innovation community, followed by selecting candidates that have not just incremental benefits, but fundamentally changing the business model, fundamentally changing the clinical impact. So for those with high disruptive potential, use pre-market healthcare technology assessment to define requirements for global requirements, and for truly disruptive technologies to in fact provide them business opportunity so that we adopt those technologies in a right way. Not that we just evaluate and say, yeah, it's the greatest thing, and then I'm sleeping and not doing anything about it. Yeah, I've identified it's the greatest technology that there is and it can bend the cost curve, so I have a mandate, I have a public obligation to get that damn thing in use. So this X site will draw multinationals from across the globe, bringing investment partnerships and ideas to Ontario, which has a world-class capability to do field evaluation. In fact, C-STAR and Epicor, and there are a whole number of institutions across Ontario that will be participating in this. So that's X-Site, and I'd love to talk to you about that later. Another one is Ontario Brain Institute. And you can read that as I can. Basically what it's saying is we have, and it's startling when you look at the numbers, to see how many neurosurgeons we have, how many procedures we do, what kind of healthcare quality we have in neuroscience and neuroscience research. And so we've done a multi-year study to say, shouldn't we be coalescing this into one large group and in fact getting synergy and collaborating with industry to really make this an engine for economic growth? And that's in fact what's happening. And so we are focusing on diagnostics and imaging, prosthetics and devices, brain fitness and training with a 3 to 7 year commercialization window. We've got about 20 companies involved. It's really a very, very exciting development linking research to industry to solving priority healthcare system problems. Another one is one that we've invested $2.25 million of $17.4 million total, is the GE Pathology Center of Excellence. Yes, you need to support small to medium-sized companies. They're the lifeline of the overall innovation community. But if you don't have M&Es here, which have the access to global markets and doing active research, you don't have the food chain of buying technologies, having people buying companies, and so on. So one of our mandates is to increase the activity of multinational enterprises in Canada. And GE is our first one, announced on January 26th. Infrastructure and image capture and storage, workflow for pathologist integration, computer-aided diagnosis, multiple academic institutions, as well as GE being involved. GE was attracted to the outstanding research and health system integration, world-class field evaluation of Ontario, but PICO, the Pathology Imaging Center, is also a commercialization platform for others. It's like okay. So those things are really hope not hope, they're reality of what we're doing in Ontario. So I want to echo quickly what some of those people were saying yesterday, lamenting the difficulties of VCs. And this is just it. This is data from on general VC investment, as well as Canadian, as well as life sciences. And you can see the trend. As I say, last VC turned the lights off. And also that we build peers rather than bridges. In other words, we are the second largest creator of companies and investment in companies in the world, in life sciences, and that's primarily biotech and so on. We're the 21st or 22nd in terms of the value of investment into those companies. So we're like, it's like Chinese water torture. I mean, we give these little tiny bits of stuff to people. We don't give anyone enough money to grow. So, and we invest, less than about 58% less than in the United States. Well, that really is wrong. But this is VC. Look at this. Angels are the real source of seed funding outside friends and family. So friends and family in the US, 60 billion. Angels, 20 billion. State funds, 0.5. Venture capital, 0.3 billion. Doesn't that startle you? So angels are 90% of the outside equity. But note, subsector analysis of Canadian and U.S. angels shows that there's a great difference between the type of angels that exist and those that are past entrepreneurs versus those that made their money in resources and are going to do a trial in Medtech. And in the U.S., Medtech angels are largely from Medtech, and in Europe, Canadian angels are mostly from IT resources-based industries, and they don't know the market. So we've got a challenge there. We've got a real challenge there, but it's something that we need to develop. I mentioned yesterday in one of my questions, the dark blue is direct government investment in companies, and the light blue is indirect through tax credits and so on. And look at the proportions. So you've got, the U.S., dark blue is direct investment, this is indirect. United States, France, Korea, Czech Republic, Spain, Sweden, 100% and so on. Look at Canada. Look at how high we are. That's great. That's great. But look at how low we are in terms of actually giving someone enough money to get going. What this says is, as Cameron says, it's great. If you got a bit of money, SR&ED is an absolute lifeline. It's fantastic. If you don't have money, it's useless because you got to invest to get the credits, right? So you got to have the money to invest to get the credits, chicken and egg. So we got to rebalance that thing. It's got that has to look more like that or that. And so we're working on that. So if you look at fundamental research, applied research, technology development, product commercialization, market entry, and these representing the amounts of play, government funding, industry funding, very, very early, venture capital, which is almost now gone, industry and banks much later on. Here's the gap. And so we've been created, we have been created, and we are funded by, we are running a fund for the Ministry of Research and Innovation, $21.4 million fund. We are, by this December or so, will be responsible for about $70 million of partnered investment in medtech company creation. And we're just in the process of raising our next fund. But that's what we exist to do, to get companies going, to change the receptiveness of the ecosystem to maximize the technology acceptance, and to prepare those companies to go global and to get some of that access to global market by bringing M&Es to Ontario. And that's a little bit of what we are. And there we are. So thank you very much.